Suddenly, it's starting to feel like the opportunities to bundle up the homestead before the ground freezes over is quickly closing in on us. I have been wanting to take some of the honeycomb, which we got from harvesting honey this summer, and make some beeswax candles along with a tincture from the propolis that I harvested from our beehives. When we harvest our honey in the summer, we save the caps that we cut off from our bee frames and we keep the remaining of the comb in the beehives for the bees. Being that we have little ones, I am always thankful when I take the time to prepare something which is going to help boost my children's immune systems during the winter months at which they're a lot more prone to catch a sickness. You can see here that I am harvesting propolis from our bee frames. Propolis is essentially a resin which the bees harvest from tree buds and sap flows. The bees then mix it with their saliva and their own enzymes to then create essentially a bee glue within the beehives. Now that I have all my honeycomb in a pot, I'm going to add in some water and put this over heat. What I want to do is melt all that beeswax and then let it harden into a solid block in the pot with the water. I'm working with a fairly dirty product here because within all of this honeycomb, there is a lot of residue and dead bees. And so what I want to do is hopefully essentially allow a lot of that to sink to the bottom in the water. Of course, some of that's going to stick and that's inevitable. And that's why we're going to repeat this process a couple different times to really get a pure comb. Depending upon how dirty your product is, you may want to repeat that first step again by melting down that block of comb with some water. However, after that, you will want to strain this through a cheesecloth. That's going to catch any remaining bee pieces or anything else that's left within your comb at this point. Now, this is a totally preference thing. It depends upon how clean of a product you want. I was really hoping for a really clean product, so I then took my final product of just the beeswax, remelted that down alone, and poured it into my molds through a cheesecloth. And you can see that I actually still caught a fair amount of dirty stuff between what was caught onto my cheesecloth and then what was left in the pot itself. When it comes to harvesting propolis from a beehive, there's a couple different methods, and I've done both. So one is just putting a trap right within your beehive itself. You can see here the bees have begun to fill it in. Of course, if I had left it in a little longer, they would have filled it in a lot more. But once you go ahead and actually clean this off, you'd be decently surprised by how much falls off the trap. Regardless of if you put a trap in there or not, the bees are going to naturally produce propolis because bees actually use this essentially as their immune system support within their hive. It's their way of keeping their hive very clean, seals cracks, and they can actually, crazily enough, use it to mummify any insects, dead insects, which come into the hive and prevent decay and bacterial growth. If you want to extract the most benefits from your propolis, you're going to want to blend it up in a blender of some sort, and that way it can easily be extracted through the alcohol tincture. Now, how much alcohol you add is going to depend upon the strength that you want for your final tincture. I personally went with the standard tincture strength, so that being a 1 to 5 ratio, I had 28 grams of propolis. Therefore, I added 140 milliliters of alcohol. You're going to want to let this sit for around 2 to 4 weeks. And after that, you can go ahead and strain it off. Once it's all strained off, it is then ready to be used in any byproducts. One of my favorite ways to use this propolis tincture is making a homemade throat spray that I can use for the kids anytime they feel a sore throat coming on. And additionally, another thing which I look forward to using this for is actually making a homemade toothpaste. Hopefully, I can get around to featuring that in another video for you guys. I knew the kids were going to want to be involved in making the beeswax candles, so I waited for another day till I had a chance to include them in on the project. For this, I went ahead and bought a little candle making kit, and I thought that was kind of a nice little easy way to go with this little project. It had plenty of supplies for me to go ahead and make more down the road. It came with around 60 different wicks, so I'll have plenty for any future makings. A fun way to source little containers for candle making is just to keep your eyes out during the summer. Anytime you're at a garage sale or out reselling, you can find cute antique little looking containers which you can create your candle in, and then of course you can keep reusing them and reusing them, so it's just a fun way to make use of a old item. As the winter months set in, I don't know if it was just because of how I was raised up or what it is, but as soon as that first snow starts to fall, I start to get this desire to make more crafts, to make the home a little cozy, pull out the sewing machine. So as our season switches over, I really look forward to enjoying some of those things while we are spending more time indoors during the cold months. This year is our third continual year of beekeeping. We have successfully overwinterized them one time. Last year we failed. This year is going to be yet another test. Bees, they naturally create a lot of heat within their hive, but if you get cold weather like we do during the winter months, we'll get up to negative 20 degrees at night. And though the bees naturally create a tremendous amount of heat within the hive, they definitely need assistance in a couple different ways. So you want to really make sure they aren't getting any draft within their hive. So you got to insulate, seal those cracks, do what you need to do. And then you also want something which is going to help absorb any moisture which they create, because they are producing so much heat. And this quilt box here, which I am putting on top of each hive, is going to help regulate any moisture which is produced within the hive. The moment dampness settles in to the beehive, they're really going to have a hard time of surviving into the spring season.